In this video, I install the E4.14 LG1 chain-guided Bashguard. To do this, I will need to remove my crankset, add a new chainring, install the Chainguide Bashguard, and put the crank back on. For this job, I will need a 1/4 inch torque and socket driver, a pick, 4 and 5mm hex bits, and a Torx 25 bit. Since I'm also replacing my chainring, I will need the Park Tool BBT9 bottom bracket tool and the direct mount chainring adapter that came with my original crankset. The easiest way to access the ISCG mounts is to get the crankset out of the way. To remove my Shimano SLX crankset, I first take off the non-drive side crank arm. This requires loosening the two bolts in the arm with the 5mm hex bit and removing the dust cap with the bottom bracket tool. Before I can pull off the crank arm, I use the pick to pull up the plate pin. Now it should come off nice and easy. On the drive side, I need to lift up the current chain guide out of the way. I just need to loosen it with my 4mm hex bit and slide it up to the top. Make sure to turn off the clutch on the rear derailleur and move the chain off the chainring. Pulling out the driver's side crank shouldn't be difficult. However, you may need to smack the axle with a rubber mallet to loosen its grip. Now that the crankset is out of the way, I can remove the old chain guide. This chain guide from MRP came with my bike frame and has worked flawlessly. However, it didn't come with a Bashguard, so it has to go. Loosen up the bolts with the 4mm hex bit and pull it off. Just a quick note, I am using my standard socket driver to remove and install these parts. Unfortunately, my 1/4 inch torque driver can no longer ratchet, so I only use it to finish off tightening the bolts. Next, let's operate on the crank. I decided to go with a smaller chain ring for my trip to Colorado, which will require a lot of climbing. First, remove the spacers that are used for the Super Boost chain line. The direct mount chainring comes off pretty easy with the adapter that came with the crankset. I just use the bottom bracket tool to loosen the locking nut. Remember, when you are performing an operation like this, use a rubbing alcohol and water mixture on a towel to clean off the dirt and grease. This is the Shimano XT 28th tooth chainring. Apparently they don't make a 28 tooth SLX ring, so I had to upgrade to the XT. Luckily, the XT and SLX parts are compatible, and it slides together quite nicely. Grease the base and slide on the locking nut. Tighten it down. I think this feels like 35 to 50 Newton meters. Slide the spacer back on, and I do believe this is ready to go. Now it's time to check out the E4.14 LG1 Plus chain guide. I like the simple paper-based box packaging and minimal use of plastics. It comes with a decal, a smaller direct mount Bashguard for smaller chain rings, IKEA-style instructions, and an assortment of mounting bolts and spacers to cover all the different chain line sizes. Since I'm running a 28th tooth chain ring, I will need to exchange the installed Bashguard with this nice smaller one. All the bolts use a T25 Torx bit, and the plastic guard swaps out pretty easily. The bolts have Loctite on them and only need to be tightened down to 2 Newton meters. Note, the lower armature, the piece that connects to the roller that guides and applies tension to the chain, can be moved to a lower position if your chainstay is below your bottom bracket. My bike's chainstay is normal, so no changes are necessary. For mounting the lower only chain guide, I need to use the longer bolts and double the spacers due to the Super Boost chain line. With the crank out of the way, this goes pretty smoothly. I will hand tighten down the bolts onto the ISCG mount and adjust them after I reinstall the crankset. When sliding the crank and axle into the bottom bracket, place the chain on top of the roller jockey. The trickiest part is getting the chain back onto the chain ring, so make sure the lower roller is the furthest out position and it shouldn't be an issue. On the other side of the bottom bracket, install the non-drive crank arm. Apply some grease and don't forget the spacer if you have a similar setup. The one part that drives me nuts on these Shimano cranksets is putting down that safety plate pin. I just about need to remove the outer bolt to get the pin back into position. There it goes, finally. Screw it back in and then install the dust cap. Once the dust cap is on, I can torque down the crank arm bolts. Now that the crankset is back together, I can adjust the Bashguard and roller position. The chainring comes with these convenient open sections to access the mounting bolts. Now this is where the instructions provided by E4.14 fail. All they mention to do is to slide the roller closer to the chainring. The picture is strange since it displays the chain on the backside of the chainring, which is impossible. But that may have been some artistic licensing to show the chain between the roller and the chainring. Either way, the instructions don't explain how the tension should work, so I figured it out myself. Lifting the backside of the guard tensions the chain to the roller. I tighten down the mounting bolts to keep the position, then slide the roller closer to the chainring. I lightly tighten the roller bolt to keep its position. The torque should only be about 1 Newton meter. If you go tighter, the roller will not spin against the chain. Finish torquing the mounting bolts to 6 Newton meters and we are ready to ride. All I need to do now is add this decal to my cabinet. We'll see how this roller performs over time. If it becomes a problem, I can easily remove it and just leave the Bashguard. If you found this video useful, please give it a like. Until next time.